The majority of the world has bought into the lie that marriage is all happy and rainbows and sunshine. It completes you. There's no pain or struggle, or if there is, something's wrong. And that's just not reality. Reality is there's a lot behind the scenes. And today we're just going to share 3 lessons that we've learned personally from our own journey, our own marriage of 3 years. We know we haven't been married that long technically, although it has felt like we've been through a lot together. So we just want to share candidly, just from our personal experiences, what we've personally learned in hopes that it will encourage you, no matter what life stage you're in, whether you're married, dating, single, wanting to be married, preparing for marriage. We just really encourage you to lean in because we know that God will use this to speak to you wherever you're at.
Hey friends, welcome back to the pod. This week we have 2 very special celebrations. I was almost going to say announcements, but that's a little too much of a cliffhanger. But we are celebrating 3 years of marriage. And I'm turning 32.
Yay! Yes, your birthday's the 15th and our anniversary is the 12th.
Yes.
12/12. So we're really excited. It's kind of surreal to think that we've been married. I mean, just the other day, like a few days ago, I turned to Alex randomly and I was like, can you believe we're married? Like, sometimes it just doesn't feel real, like our life.
Yeah.
At the same time, I feel like it's been longer, like a lot longer. So today we're going to share 3 big lessons that we've learned in our 3 years of marriage, although there are so many more. Like, we could write a whole book about it. Maybe we will someday. But today we're just going to go with 3 to keep it short and simple and catchy.
Anything with 3.
Yeah. Because I think there are studies that show if you do 3, it's a lot more easy for people to remember. But then beyond that, it's like too many things that, what is it called? Keep track of or store in your brain.
Yeah. 4 is not as catchy. 5's too much. 2's too little. 1's like...
I mean, even Jesus chose 3 to be his days of suspense.
Oh, yeah. 3 days. And then,
before coming back.
And he was about 33 when he died.
Oh, shoot. I didn't realize that.
Ooh, 3s are everywhere. And Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Wow, yeah.
There is no 4th one.
We came up with these 3 lessons together. And how fitting is that to segue into our first lesson? So the first lesson that we both have learned in marriage, and I feel like especially in this season, in this year of dreaming together, doing ministry, business, podcast, coaching, all the things together, and also, planning for the future together, it's been really interesting, I think, for me personally. So basically, I think when you're single, a lot of like decisions that you make, or when you like ask God for directions or clarity, you're really just like asking God yourself. And you, of course, you get like input from friends and mentors and whatever, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like God will speak to you, and then you, on the best of your ability, just move forward, right, in faith.
It's not even God speaking to you. It's just also preferences.
Right.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah. It's God speaking to you, your preferences, desires, while other people are advising you, blah, blah, blah. So it's like one person. But then in marriage, it's completely different because it's like now you're a unit. You're like together. So like your decisions, your preferences, it's not just all about you. It's like about the other person and how it affects both of you guys. So it's like so important to be in step with each other. But how do you do that? And I feel like that is one of the biggest difficulties that a lot of people face, especially if the other person has different values or even different beliefs. Like, it's really difficult to move forward when you're like literally on different wavelengths. But what I'm getting to is basically when you're single, it's like God will give you the pieces as much as possible, and like the puzzle is pretty much like you are doing the puzzle yourself with God. But now it's like in marriage, it's you and your spouse and God doing the puzzle together. So it's like another 3 people involved in it. So for us, we've experienced many times, like even in our business or podcast or planning for the future, like asking God separately for clarity and then coming together. And as we come together, it's like, oh, God gave us different pieces, and actually the pieces connect. And it's like so cool, right? Like, just like you said last week in your birthday Q&A, like you love systems and processes, and my eyes glaze over when you said all
Your
those
eyes
words.
literally glaze over. I haven't seen that before.
Because usually you're not talking about things that I'm not interested with me, but anyway, yeah, versus I'm like, my strengths complement yours, and I'm more creative and I can do like writing and marketing, stuff like that, design, stuff that you don't like doing, or that's not your strength. And so I feel like that's even just like a little way, but another way has been when we've been, discussing the future and like dreaming, casting vision for the future. And like I'm blown away all the time by how like I'll ask God for clarity on things, and it's like half of the picture or part of the picture, and I'm like, I don't know like what this means, or why is God giving me this or that. And then when I come to you and then you share like what you've gotten from God, it's like the pieces just like click, right? So yeah, I feel like it's the metaphor is like you're doing the puzzle together and you're like, oh, I found this piece. Like, and then you're looking at, oh, what pieces did you find? And then you're like putting it together versus trying to do it on your own with the other person not, participating. So
Yeah, yeah. Grace and I are definitely a very different people, and it I mean, over time, like I knew she was different from me in many ways, but I think this also applies not just only to things we do together, but just like everything else. I
yeah.
think if I dated or even married like a male version or a female version of myself, I think life would be kind of boring. um,
Yeah. I feel like
yeah,
we balance each other out. Like my strengths and your weaknesses, and then your strengths and my weaknesses. It's like complementary. It like I used to, for example, we mentioned this last week, like I used to be like very positive, didn't really know how to empathize with people's feelings and emotions and sit with them. And then you were on the opposite spectrum of being an Eeyore and like super mopey and not knowing how to have the positive outlook as much. So it's like,
now I'm a little more balanced.
yeah. And same with me. Like I've learned from you how to like sit with people, and you've learned from me how to have hope and optimism and encourage while sitting with people.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Also, even coming together, we were different spiritually too.
Mm.
Like just different expressions. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
Grace was more, I don't know, more spontaneous in her faith, more like spirit led, I guess. I don't know what's the right word for it. Whereas I was more by the Bible kind of guy.
I was
Um,
by the Bible too.
I mean, you definitely were, but I'm trying to find what the right word is.
Okay.
Um, it's
Well,
it's
I do feel like I think I don't want to mislead people. We weren't different spiritually. We were like we follow God. We love Jesus.
oh
We
yeah,
care
yeah.
about the Bible. I think what you're trying to say is we um had different experiences and backgrounds with faith.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So
Yes.
like the ways that we interacted with God or like thought about how to follow him were also slightly different, and the ways we were used to, understanding expressions of faith and worship and all that was also slightly different. So there were differences there.
hmm Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what
That's exactly what I was
I
saying.
just don't want people to think we were following different gods or something.
Definitely not. You said a lot better than I could. Yeah, so there was that. I think that was very beautiful in that I learned from her experiences and she learns from my experiences, and we create a more together we created a more holistic
Mm,
view of God and
right.
of faith
Right.
as well. Versus if I was just dating a female version of myself, it would be just going down one lane,
Right.
and never not really switching lanes.
Mm. Or like broadening. I don't think it's switching. It's like
Yeah, broadening
broadening.
broadening
Yeah,
my
yeah.
horizons a bit.
Yeah. That's good. I think the deeper takeaway from this first lesson is that's why it's so important to seek out and date and be with someone and marry someone who also seeks God, because it's like if only one of you is seeking God in things, the other person's kind of like not participating in the puzzle piecing of it. So
Yeah, I have a question that's
no, don't ask it. I already know. I already know.
that's one of your
Don't ask.
holy
I
discontent.
don't
But
want to answer.
what do you think about people unequally yoked dating?
That's a different podcast episode. we're not gonna do this right now.
It's related though.
Okay, I'll just get
Just give
I'll answer
your
that
30-second
in the
pitch.
context of this question, which was what I was getting to, which was it's it makes all the difference if you're with someone who believes in God and loves God, wants to honor him, wants to follow him, because it's like you're going the same trajectory, you're going the same direction. Otherwise, if not, then only one of you is pursuing God, the other one's kind of like getting distracted or going other directions. So it's kind of like those race the game where you like tie your feet together and you're like trying to coordinate like running.
Oh, the three-legged race.
Three-legged. Oh, another three. Yes, it's like doing a three-legged race with someone who's like not in sync with you. So versus when you're doing a three-legged race, you're like, okay, this is the pace we're going, this is the direction we're going, we're gonna do it together, So I feel like that's been the experience. But anyway, I was getting to like the fact that both of us can seek after God individually and come together with our pieces that then connect. I feel like just proves and it shows me even more the strength that comes. I just can't imagine doing that with someone who doesn't seek after God or doesn't want to know and follow God, in the same way.
I think God's grace is there if you're unequally yoked, but it's going to be a hard battle. And I feel like if one person wants to pursue God or does certain things, then the other person doesn't, then it's just like so much harder. Even practically speaking, like, okay, what if one person doesn't want to go to church and the other does? Well, that's also a friction point that you two need to discuss. So, yeah, it's definitely super important to be aligned spiritually, but also like with our gifts too, like what Grace said.
I have a lot more thoughts to this, so can we move on to the second question? Otherwise, this will become a branch off. It'll become a multiverse of this topic.
Oh, sure. The second one is for the dudes, but you can speak.
Well, I think it's for both, but you can speak for the dudes and I'll speak for the women.
I grew up, let's just say, I grew up with not many strong male figures.
You were a Pam.
Okay, what's a Pam for people who don't know?
A passive Asian man. All Asian women know this.
Yes. I was definitely a Pam. So because I didn't have that role model, I was very passive in life. Actually, not all areas of life, but especially in relationships, and I wasn't too good with ladies. But thank you for God's grace that I have grace.
Literally.
So that's kind of the context. But what I've learned in dating and also in marriage is the importance of the man stepping up into leadership and to take initiative on things. Like an example, we recently celebrated our 5-year dating anniversary. Yay. And Grace told me that she wanted to do something to celebrate. And so I planned something. We went out to eat, got Thai food, really, really good. And you're happy, right?
Yes.
You are happy, right?
Yes. Yeah, I loved it. Mango sticky rice. Yes.
Yeah. So that's just one example. Another example is as a man leading spiritually, it can be as simple as praying for a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Like
not, how there's always that awkward, like, who wants to pray? And like no one does it. It's like, why? Okay, can we just say, why is that a thing where people are like afraid or like don't want to pray? Like praying is such an amazing activity and opportunity to bless people and connect with God. And it's like, I don't know, for me personally, I don't want to always be the only one praying. So
me neither.
No, but I think for guys, it's like, oh, wait, it's such a easy, low hanging fruit to step up as a spiritual leader, to just be like, take the offer to pray.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to do it all the time, but at least step up
Yeah.
every once in a while.
Right. Yeah, I feel like women really want men to step up and take initiative on things more than men realize. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there about this, but like men, this is going to be a little controversial, but men not taking initiative and becoming Pams basically is causing this issue that we're seeing so much more now in society, where women feel like they have to become like the male role. Like
Ooh,
women
preach
have
it.
to
Go on.
like almost as like over feminism of like women are in charge, women are going to do everything, and it's like women empowerment to an unhealthy degree, where like men now in that lens are disempowered and like weak, and disrespected in a way. And it's like, no, actually God created Adam and Eve differently, and he created Eve out of Adam, and Adam is supposed to be like the head, of the household. Where and then, there it talks about how women in the Bible, it talks about how women need to be submitted to the man, but then the man also loves and is submitted to the woman too. So it's like a mutual submission. But I think oftentimes people get it mixed up of like, oh, like women are seen as weak, and then guys are like, this toxic masculinity is like killing relationships or whatever. But it's like, actually, it's about both genders leading in different ways, and as women supporting the man to be the spiritual leader of the household, So
Hmm. What are some practical ways that women can support men?
yeah, I feel like one very simple but very powerful is just encouragement, like just affirming them, like calling out their gifts and strengths, and saying like, great job, blah blah blah, or I love how you blah blah blah. It's like
Hmm.
just making them feel seen and known, just being their cheerleader, their encourager. And then also just allowing them to lead. Like sometimes I think, especially when you've been raised as like, I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, like
Oh man.
like that mentality of like, oh, I'll just do everything. Then if you do everything, you're basically enabling the other person to not do anything. So, there's one example is like sometimes, for our dates, I'm like, oh, could you plan? Like, I could totally, sure, I'll like take on the burden and like plan something, but it's like, I actually want to give you the opportunity to step up as like the man to take initiative in planning stuff. So then I'll communicate that, right? Um, so yeah, it's kind of just like letting go of things and knowing that you don't have to do everything, because if you did everything, then that doesn't give the other person a chance to step up. But also not expecting the other person to read your mind and like fill in that role if you haven't like communicated those expectations either,
Hmm.
which is it's
Facts.
difficult because as women, we all want the man to do things without us telling them. But I think it just comes over time
Yeah. Yeah.
and understanding that if they don't do something, it doesn't mean. I think oftentimes it's like these narratives, these false narratives we have in our heads, like from our upbringing, like, oh, if they don't do this, that means they don't love me, or that means that they don't care, or that means that I'm gonna have to lead, and blah blah blah. I wish they led more.
Man, it's so cringy to look back on a relationship. I was so passive that I don't even know how we ended up together.
Well, I think one of the most unpassive things you did was come to Australia to meet me. That
that
was a huge
was
sign.
that was if there was like a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being most passive, I think flying to Australia was like 30.
You mean 10 being the most unpassive?
10 being the most most active.
Yeah.
It was like a 30.
Yeah. Which impressed the heck out of me because most guys would not do that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Pay the money, take initiative, take the
So
time.
so if there's a guy right now listening wondering if they're a passive, maybe you're not Asian. If you are Asian, then you're a Pam. If you're not Asian, then you're a passive male. But if they are wondering if they're passive and how they can become more of an active leader, like what does that look like?
Well, first of all, some people don't even know if they're passive.
Exactly. How do they
And
know?
man, I mean, I would love your thoughts actually on this, but I think
Yes, we're gonna
overthinking
have thoughts.
is one. It's not always, but if there's signs of overthinking or indecision, then yeah, that could be a sign of passivity. Another is there's hesitancy in not taking the lead. Sometimes it could be relationships. Other times you can find evidence of that at work or anything else. Um, One simple evidence that you can look at is when you're with friends or when you're with each other as a couple, how do you decide on food? Like that's one example. Like, are you the person who's like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? I don't care. That just shows that you don't really you're not stamping your opinion down. And yeah, what do you think
Yeah.
about that? Mm.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's like that's not the case all the time, but definitely an indicator. But I think I think all women listening to this can really relate because, oh my gosh, all the conversations I would have with my friends in college, like, why are all the guys so passive? So, okay, guys, this is the women's point of view. Okay, just
This is the more valid
this is the
one.
secret sauce. This is you get this for free. You're welcome. So basically, women want men who don't just talk to talk but walk the walk, right? So it's like if you are really nice to them, but then you don't ask them out on a date, or you don't like express like, hey, I'm interested. Like it's just the lack of clarity, the confusion, the oh,
Mm.
they are nice, but they seem nice to everyone. So it's confusing what's going on and they're not communicating, and it's like
Yeah, you have to
playing
guess.
games. Yeah. And it's like we are too old to be playing games. Like
What are we in
we
kindergarten?
want a mature man who can communicate and be direct and brave and courageous and be like, I'm gonna risk my reputation or my whatever and go out on a limb and ask you on a date. And even if I get rejected, I'm gonna be fine. Like that confidence. And I think if men don't take initiative, and not just that, but just like, yeah, like just like you said, if a group is trying to make a decision and the guys are always like, oh, we don't care, or like never taking initiative to plan like, oh, let's go on this trip, or let's do this activity, or let's coordinate. And then that's where you see oftentimes women are the ones taking charge of like, oh, let's coordinate, blah blah, and then the women are doing all the planning. And it's
Yeah.
not to say like men have to be good at planning, but it's just like make the effort, or like at least communicate, hey, let's like do it's like the action. Like women want guys who can do action. I guess it's kind of like what God wants from us, really, as believers. Like sometimes we go to church, we just listen to stuff, and then, but it's like, do you actually, or like you read your word, and it's like, do you actually put the thing that you're reading into action, or are you just like
Yes.
passively,
Yes. Without faith, it is
right?
without actions, faith
Faith is
is
dead.
dead.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. So without actions, whatever you're trying to communicate is dead.
Yeah.
So,
I think another indicator that that you could be passive is just ask your significant other. You could literally
I was talking to people without significant other. Yeah.
okay. Now I'm transitioning to people with significant others for the men here. Just ask your significant other. You could
Yeah.
literally say, "Hey, so I read this or I listened to this podcast called Let's Unpack This with Alex and Grace, and they were talking about their lessons they learned in marriage, and they talked about passive Asian men. And I was wondering, do you think I'm passive?" And
But you have to ask in a way that's like, please be honest, it's okay. Like,
yeah, exactly.
otherwise people will be like, you're not passive. But then inside they're like, yeah, you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The third one is one that is not often talked about, but I think comprises a lot of marriage, and that is triggers. That's not the lesson, but it's about triggers. And the lesson is in marriage, whenever you feel triggered, which is it's a way of saying I feel like emotional about something
Like
or
upset or
upset
frustrated,
or frustrated.
disappointed, sad.
Yeah, you feel like that feeling,
Uncomfortable.
uncomfortable feeling that you get when something happens or when someone says something. You just feel like that. That hurts, or it's just unsettling.
It's like
So
when you step on a Lego.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it
Ouch.
literally triggers a response.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what triggers are. It's like a response to perceived pain.
Mm-hmm.
So in marriage, there are triggers that you need to manage. And triggers are really just an indicator of an area of your life that you haven't fully healed yet. And that comes up a lot in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a myth, I believe it's a myth that marriages create problems, but it actually reveals problems. They were already
Mm.
there to begin with, but it's just highlighted because you're together, you're
Mm-hmm.
dating, or you're married. It's just there.
Mm-hmm.
It, an example, during COVID 2020, a lot of couples actually got into a lot of fights, like a lot of disagreements, a lot of friction, and they didn't have that much before. But it wasn't until they were stuck in a home and forced to confront each other that the conflicts happened. It's not like
Right.
it wasn't there already, but it was just
Revealed.
revealed in that situation.
Right. Because it's like easy if you're not married, it's easy to just give one part of yourself or one, you know, like it's easy to put on a mask and pretend to be a version of yourself and then like present the nice version of yourself to other people. But like when you're married, you're literally like one, like you're combined and you also see and know your full self, like the other person's full self. So it's like you can't hide. There's no place to hide your full self, which is beautiful and scary at the same time. That's where it's very
Mm,
vulnerable and intimate in that way, and that in the sense that the other person can see all of you and love and enjoy all of you like in your fullness of yourself. At
mhm.
the same time, that includes your flaws and your brokenness and your insecurities and your fears and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so important to just in general, just be open to emotional and mental healing, and even having the humility to admit that
Mm-hmm.
is goes such a long way. The lesson is whenever you feel triggered in a relationship, it's a sign that there's an area of your life that you need healing and you need to address it.
Mm-hmm. And that comes up in marriage in what example? What way?
Many ways. Um like when fights happen,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, actually many times when fights happen, doesn't have to be like verbal fighting, but just you get on each other's nerves, or there's just something competing, or there's friction. It's usually a sign of something underneath. Um, I guess I can explain this better in with examples.
I'll share an example because it's kind of related to our second lesson. So it's
Okay,
like a full loop.
go for it.
So like during COVID, I remember there was an instance. This was around like March or April, I forget. But we were living separately with different housemates. Do you remember this? I basically spiraled because I was like, how come Alex doesn't want to see me? Like his housemates apparently were telling you like, oh, you shouldn't go over because of COVID, and like it was still a mystery what COVID was at the time. So like I remember you were texting me like, oh, my housemates told me, it's probably not good to go over right now and see you. But then I was like really upset because I was like, are you just using that as an excuse because you don't want to see me? Like for me, I got triggered because I don't know. I just felt like, oh, this is what I was deeply afraid of, was that you actually didn't love me that much and you didn't want to like go the extra mile for me. And so now there's a COVID excuse and like you're using it as an excuse to not see me. So I remember being like just super distraught and like,
Mm,
do you remember that?
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Maybe I blocked it out a little bit,
Okay.
but yeah.
Yeah, I was like in this spiral, very dark spiral, because I was like, oh my gosh, the fact that you are just listening to your housemates and then you told me your housemates don't want you to see me is just an excuse. And I was like playing this narrative in my head, but basically it was like reinforcing my fear of you don't actually love me and I'm not lovable or I'm not worthy or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, when triggers happen, we tend to create or form a false belief system. Like in that example, the belief that she held was Alex doesn't love me or Alex doesn't care about me, which isn't true,
Mm-hmm.
but it would just reminded you of
Right.
that.
Right. But what really helped, I remember, was because you actually did eventually come over when I think I shared with you, I was like super upset. I forget what happened, but you actually did come over and then you just held me as I was like crying and I was like, you don't actually love me and you don't actually care. But then you told me like, I'll love you even if you don't love me back or something like that.
Ooh, that's a good move.
You
I
said
did
some
say that.
yeah, you said something like, even if you don't love me, like I'll still love you or something like that.
Mm,
But
yeah.
it really touched me even though I was a mess. But I think it helped dispel the myth, like, or my assumption was like, oh, you don't love me. But then you reaffirm that you do and you showed it through your actions. Um, and then you then explained the full picture of what was actually going on instead of just, I think that's why a lot of things get lost in translation in text, because I think you just briefly said, oh, my housemates don't think I should go. And then when I read that, I was like, what? That's like not a good excuse or not a good reason. But I think you're explaining like their concerns and then like just you're affirming and encouraging
Mm,
me that you're like dispelling my fears.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like in marriage, it's like when triggers come up, it's so important to really like help identify what is the other person's deepest fear right now, and then how can you speak life and encouragement to dispel those fears and the false narratives that are playing in their heads.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a few counseling sessions on family of origin, which is actually where a lot of triggers come from, is your family upbringing. And when things come up, it reminds me of some of the painful things that my parents had to go through, even though they weren't completely true. And same with her parents as well. And I think it's just super important to lean into that and understand where things are coming from,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of life we just make up stuff in our heads. It's really
Right.
the battle is won in your head
Mm-hmm.
and or your mind, and we need to have the humility to embrace that. And I'll also say, when triggers happen in relationship or marriage, it's not really a sign. It can be a sign, but it's not a sign that your relationship is broken or it's going downhill. But you're having an emotional flashback to something that happened.
That hasn't been healed yet.
Yeah, that hasn't been healed yet. So when I was growing up, my dad was the sole breadwinner. And one thing that I noticed was my dad was the breadwinner. Nothing wrong with that. That's not really the bad part. But um, my mom didn't make as much money, but I think there were times when, as a kid, my dad was secretly, privately telling me that like mom doesn't contribute much, or she doesn't like step in, or I've tried to ask her for help on things but she doesn't do it. So I just, to me, the narrative I created was, oh, mom must be taking advantage of my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want that to happen to me. And now in this season, I think I do feel it's a lot better than my parents, but there is still some subconscious pressure that I do put on myself to provide, and um to dispel the myth that even Grace is taking advantage of me, which I know isn't true.
Mm.
So it's something I'm working
Definitely
on.
not true. FYI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually it's funny because it's for me it's the exact opposite of like I don't I really badly don't want to be seen by you as taking advantage, that I place a lot of pressure on myself to be ultra productive or try to help as much as I can. And then it's like for me the battle is not being stuck in that cycle of shame of like I didn't do enough, or I'm not working hard enough, or I'm not enough.
Mm.
And I'm not a bird. Like I think a common lie I have to constantly battle is like feeling like a burden or feeling like I'm not, because my whole life I felt like I needed to be helpful or and provide value and do helpful things in order to be seen as like valuable. So for me in this time, at least financially, to not be doing that, I because I always had a vision of like I want to, you know, be able to help retire you and like, like do what I can to create income and passive income and like things that will sustain our family for the future. So like it's interesting that your fears are like the exact opposite of like my fears, if that makes sense. Okay, let's summarize the 3 lessons that we just shared. So one is in marriage, you both of you have puzzle pieces that you seek from God, and God speaks through your spouse and you together as a team to see the full picture oftentimes. Not all the time, but oftentimes. Number 2 was what?
Men, step it up.
Oh yeah, number 2 was men are designed to be spiritual leaders, and we encourage you as men to do that and step up. At the same time, women, it's important to allow the man to step up and relinquish control, especially if you're a very independent, self-driven, high-achieving kind of woman. And then the third part is there are triggers that come up in marriage and in life, but it's revealed even more and magnified even more in marriage. But if you have two people who are willing to communicate and, help dispel the false narratives going on in your minds, then it helps immensely. Otherwise, it's like one person's battling a battle that the other person like isn't engaged with. So it's like helping the other person know. I think at the end of the day, like all of these are actually just ways that you come together as a team, right? Like the first one is being teammates in seeking clarity from God and direction and following God. The second one is being teammates in complementing your different strengths and giftings and callings and how you're designed. And then number 3 is being teammates in helping each other battle the battles in your mind by when you notice someone getting triggered, like instead of blaming them or defending yourself, like actually just stepping into their pain and their fears and addressing that with love and compassion and encouragement and truth. All right. Hope that was helpful for you guys. Even if you're married or not married, we feel like these lessons are really important. If you're single or if you're dating, like it's so important to like learn about marriage and be preparing yourself for marriage if that is on your heart. That's part of what you desire and what you feel like God wants for you and has for you. And then separately, if you are married, we hope this helps you in your marriage. We're not experts by any means, but these are just some things that we've learned ourselves. So
thank you so much for listening in, tuning into this podcast. We hope that our 3-year marriage journey and dating journey really helped equip you, inspire you, encourage you. And really important, if you haven't subscribed to our email list yet, we highly recommend that you subscribe because we are coming out with awesome content and more opportunities that will transform your life. I'll keep it very vague, very ambiguous because we want it to be a surprise, and it is going to be great. Yeah. So please subscribe to the email list or you'll be missing out.
Great. See you guys next week.